A Labour MP just did the unthinkable, live on national television in front of millions of viewers. They publicly challenged Keir Starmer and demanded the immediate release of a jailed mother. The room fell silent. Cameras captured every second of the Prime Minister's stunned expression. This wasn't a private disagreement behind closed doors. This was a full-blown rebellion broadcast to the entire nation. The MP's voice trembled with emotion as they spoke about a mother torn from her children, locked behind bars while her family suffers. Starmer tried to maintain his composure, but you could see it, the cracks forming in his carefully constructed political facade. What could possibly drive a member of his own party to such a desperate act of defiance? What did this mother do that has split the Labour Party down the middle? And why is this story being buried by mainstream media when it should be dominating every headline? The answers will shock you to your core. The confrontation happened just 1 minute ago, and the political aftershocks are already tearing through Westminster like an earthquake. The Labour MP, whose identity is sending shockwaves through party headquarters, stood up during a live parliamentary session and did something that political experts are calling unprecedented. They looked directly at Keir Starmer and demanded answers about a mother who has been languishing in prison while her case has been systematically ignored by the justice system. The MP's words cut through the chamber like a knife through butter. They spoke of injustice, of a woman whose only crime was standing up for what she believed was right, of children crying themselves to sleep every night wondering when their mummy is coming home. The emotion was raw, unfiltered, and absolutely devastating. Starmer's face told a story that his words never could. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his usual confident demeanour completely shattered. His advisers scrambled, whispering frantically in his ear, clearly unprepared for this public challenge from within his own ranks. But who is this mysterious jailed mother, and why has her case become the flashpoint for such an explosive confrontation? According to sources close to the situation, she was arrested during protests earlier this year. The exact nature of her involvement remains murky, with conflicting reports painting vastly different pictures of what actually transpired. Some say she was simply exercising her right to free speech, standing up for her community and her family's future. Others claim she crossed legal boundaries, though these accusations have never been fully substantiated in a way that satisfies her growing number of supporters. What everyone agrees on is this: her sentencing was harsh, unusually harsh, especially for someone with no prior criminal record and young children depending on her. The judge's decision raised eyebrows across the legal community, with several prominent lawyers publicly questioning the proportionality of the punishment. Yet despite these concerns, despite the mounting evidence that something isn't quite right about this case, the wheels of justice have ground to a halt. Appeals have been delayed, hearings postponed, and every attempt to review her case has been met with bureaucratic stonewalling. The Labour MP who spoke out today has clearly had enough of the silence and inaction. Their intervention wasn't spontaneous or reckless. This was calculated, planned and executed with surgical precision at a moment when maximum attention was guaranteed. They chose to make their stand during Prime Minister's questions, one of the most watched political events in the British calendar, ensuring that their message would reach millions of people simultaneously. The MP laid out the facts with devastating clarity. They described how this mother's children are being cared for by relatives who are struggling to cope with the emotional and financial burden. They detailed the mental health crisis unfolding within the family, the eldest child's grades plummeting at school, the youngest refusing to eat or sleep properly. They painted a picture of a family being torn apart by what they characterised as a grotesque miscarriage of justice. And then came the hammer blow, the direct demand that Starmer personally intervene to secure this woman's immediate release. The political implications of this moment cannot be overstated. Labour has always prided itself on being the party of working people, the party that stands up for ordinary families against an unjust system. Yet here was one of their own MPs accusing their own Prime Minister of abandoning those very principles. The hypocrisy was laid bare for everyone to see. Starmer attempted to respond, to deflect and defer, but his words rang hollow in the face of such passionate conviction. He spoke about respecting judicial independence, about not interfering with ongoing legal processes, about the importance of allowing the system to work. Standard political boilerplate that might have worked in any other situation, but not this one, not when confronted with the reality of children suffering and a mother imprisoned under questionable circumstances. The MP wasn't having it. They pushed back harder, their voice rising with each sentence, demanding to know why Starmer could find time to intervene in international conflicts, but couldn't lift a finger to help a British mother and her children. The chamber erupted in chaos. Opposition MPs seized the opportunity to pile on, sensing blood in the water and a Prime Minister weakened by division within his own party. Conservative members shouted questions about Labour's commitment to law and order, trying to paint Starmer as either too weak to control his party or too callous to care about British families. The Speaker struggled to maintain order as the debate spiralled into something far bigger than anyone had anticipated. What started as one MP's impassioned plea had transformed into a full-scale examination of Starmer's leadership, his values and his government's priorities. Social media immediately exploded with reaction. Within minutes, the hashtag about the jailed mother was trending nationally, then internationally. Videos of the confrontation were being shared thousands of times per minute, with people across the political spectrum weighing in with their opinions. Some praised the MP for their courage in speaking truth to power, for putting principles above party loyalty. Others criticised them for undermining their own Prime Minister and potentially damaging Labour's electoral prospects. But here's what makes this story even more extraordinary. The mainstream media has been eerily quiet about this mother's case until now. For months, her family and supporters have been trying desperately to get attention for her plight, reaching out to journalists, organising small protests, creating online campaigns. They were met with virtual silence. Major news outlets ignored their press releases, refused to cover their demonstrations, declined to investigate the circumstances of her arrest and conviction. The few articles that did appear were buried deep in newspaper websites, given minimal coverage and quickly forgotten. Why? What made this story so radioactive that even news organisations supposedly committed to holding power accountable wanted nothing to do with it? The timing raises uncomfortable questions. Was there pressure from somewhere to keep this story quiet? Did her case touch on issues too controversial, too politically sensitive for comfort? Or is there something else, something darker lurking beneath the surface that powerful people desperately want to keep hidden? The MP who triggered this political earthquake isn't backing down despite the chaos they've unleashed. Sources close to them reveal this wasn't a moment of impulse, but the culmination of weeks of behind-the-scenes efforts to resolve the situation quietly. They tried working through official channels, submitting formal inquiries, meeting with Justice Department officials, even reaching out directly to Starmer's office, requesting a private meeting to discuss the case. Every avenue was blocked, every request denied or ignored. They were told repeatedly that nothing could be done, that the matter was out of political hands, that they should let the legal system run its course. But after speaking with the jailed mother's family, after looking into the eyes of her traumatised children, after reviewing the details of her case and the questionable circumstances surrounding her conviction, this MP decided that silence was no longer an option. Going public was their last resort, a desperate gamble that public pressure might achieve what private diplomacy could not. The details of the mother's case become more disturbing the deeper you dig. She was arrested during a protest that by all accounts remained peaceful until police intervention escalated tensions. Eyewitness testimony, which was largely excluded from her trial, describes officers using aggressive tactics that provoked the crowd rather than de-escalating the situation. Video footage from that day, some of which mysteriously disappeared from evidence files only to resurface weeks later through independent journalists, shows a very different sequence of events than what was presented in court. The prosecution's case relied heavily on testimony from officers whose own body cameras were conveniently malfunctioning during critical moments. The mother's defence team argued that she was being made an example of, that authorities were determined to hand down harsh sentences to a few protesters to discourage future demonstrations. The judge dismissed these arguments, but legal observers noted unusual aspects of the trial that raised serious questions about its fairness and impartiality. Her children have become the invisible victims of this entire ordeal. The eldest, a bright student who dreamed of becoming a doctor, has stopped attending school regularly and withdrawn from friends and activities. Teachers report dramatic personality changes, from an outgoing, confident child to someone who barely speaks and seems haunted by anxiety. The middle child, barely 8 years old, has started having severe nightmares and panic attacks, waking up screaming for their mother multiple times a night. Child psychologists working with the family warn of long-term developmental damage if the situation isn't resolved soon. The youngest doesn't fully understand what's happening, but knows that mummy is gone and keeps asking when she's coming home, breaking the hearts of the relatives struggling to provide answers and stability. These aren't abstract concepts or political talking points. These are real children suffering real trauma that will follow them for the rest of their lives. And yet the system grinds on. Indifferent to their pain, more concerned with procedure and precedent than with basic human compassion. The political ramifications for Starmer are potentially catastrophic. Labour's polling numbers have been shaky recently, with voters expressing disappointment that the party hasn't delivered on its promises of transformative change. This incident plays directly into those criticisms, painting Starmer as just another establishment politician, more interested in maintaining power than in fighting for justice. The MP's challenge wasn't just about one jailed mother. It was a proxy for larger questions about what Labour stands for and who it represents. If the party won't fight for a mother unjustly separated from her children, what will it fight for? If Starmer is unwilling to challenge a questionable conviction when confronted with evidence of unfairness, when will he show courage? These questions are resonating far beyond Westminster in communities across Britain where people feel increasingly disconnected from a political system that seems to work for everyone except ordinary working families. Labour's traditional base is watching this situation very carefully, and their verdict will have consequences that extend far beyond this single case. Opposition parties are already sharpening their attacks. Conservative MPs are framing this as evidence of Labour chaos and division, a government unable to manage its own party, let alone the country. They're highlighting the contradiction between Labour's tough on crime rhetoric and this MP's demand for release, trying to paint the party as hypocritical and opportunistic. Reform UK and other smaller parties are positioning themselves as the true defenders of free speech and civil liberties, using this case to attract voters disillusioned with both major parties. Even Lib Dems, typically cautious about jumping into controversial issues, are asking pointed questions about the justice system and whether it's working fairly for everyone. The political centre of gravity is shifting, and Starmer finds himself in an impossible position. Any action he takes will alienate someone, and inaction is increasingly untenable as public pressure mounts. Behind the scenes, Labour strategists are in panic mode. Internal polling shows the issue is cutting through to voters in ways few political stories do, combining emotional appeal with substantive questions about justice and fairness. Focus groups reveal deep unease about how the mother's case was handled and scepticism about official explanations. Party members are divided, with constituency groups demanding statements of support for the MP who spoke out, while others worry about appearing soft on law enforcement. WhatsApp groups and private Slack channels are buzzing with arguments and debates, exposing fault lines within the party that have been papered over but never truly resolved. Starmer's inner circle is torn between different strategies, some advocating a tough response to reassert authority, others counselling a more conciliatory approach that addresses the substance of the MP's concerns. The decision they make in the next few hours could determine not just the fate of this jailed mother, but the future trajectory of Starmer's premiership. The media blackout that preceded today's dramatic confrontation is starting to crack as more journalists pick up the story and begin asking questions that should have been asked months ago. Why was this case ignored for so long? Who made the decision to give it minimal coverage despite its obviously newsworthy elements? Were news organisations acting independently, or was there coordination, perhaps pressure from government or corporate sources? Some veteran journalists are speaking out, expressing shame that they didn't pursue the story earlier and vowing to give it the attention it deserves now. Others remain defensive, insisting their news judgment was sound, and that the case only became significant because of today's parliamentary drama. This debate about media responsibility and editorial independence is adding another layer to an already complex story. Citizens are increasingly questioning what other important stories might be slipping through the cracks. What other injustices might be occurring in plain sight while news organisations focus on celebrity gossip and political theatre instead of substance. The jailed mother's family is watching these developments with a mixture of hope and trepidation that's almost unbearable. For months, they felt completely powerless, watching their loved ones suffer behind bars while every attempt to help her seemed to hit a brick wall. Now, suddenly, their private nightmare has become a national political crisis, with the Prime Minister himself being forced to address their situation on live television. Part of them is elated that finally someone with real power is listening and taking their concerns seriously. But another part is terrified of what happens if this moment passes without meaningful action, if all the attention and outrage amount to nothing more than another news cycle that fades away, leaving them back where they started. They've been disappointed so many times before by politicians who expressed sympathy but delivered nothing, by lawyers who promised appeals that went nowhere, by activists who moved on to other causes. This feels different, more significant, but they've learnt not to hope too much because the crash when hope dies is almost worse than never having any at all. Legal experts are now re-examining the mother's case with fresh eyes, and what they're finding is deeply troubling. Multiple attorneys who specialise in protest-related cases have gone on record saying the conviction appears questionable based on the evidence presented at trial. They point to procedural irregularities, questionable evidentiary rulings by the judge, and a sentencing decision that seems wildly disproportionate to the alleged offence. One prominent barrister described it as one of the most concerning cases they've reviewed in years, suggesting it should never have resulted in prison time, let alone the lengthy sentence imposed. These opinions carry weight in legal circles and are putting additional pressure on the justice system to take another look. Appeals courts typically defer to trial court decisions, but when you have this level of expert consensus that something went wrong, it becomes harder to simply wave away the concerns and maintain that justice was served. The system's credibility is on the line, and how it responds to this challenge will send a message about whether it's truly interested in fairness or just in protecting its own decisions regardless of merit. The MP at the centre of this storm is now facing both support and backlash from different quarters. Their constituency party has released a statement backing their actions and praising their courage in standing up for justice, even when it meant challenging their own party leader. Grassroots Labour members have flooded their office with messages of support, thanking them for remembering what the party is supposed to stand for. But they're also receiving threats and harassment, with some particularly vicious attacks coming from people claiming to support law and order who see any sympathy for convicted protesters as dangerous and subversive. Their social media feeds have become battlegrounds. Their family members are being targeted, and security experts are advising them to take precautions for their own safety. This is the personal cost of taking a principled stand in modern politics. You become a lightning rod for all the frayage and division that permeates our society, and even doing what you believe is right can put you and your loved ones at risk. Starmer now faces a decision that could define his entire premiership. Does he dig in and refuse to intervene, maintaining that political leaders shouldn't interfere with judicial processes even when those processes appear flawed? Does he take some middle ground, ordering a review of the case while stopping short of demanding immediate release? Or does he make the bold choice to throw his full weight behind getting this mother out of prison and reunited with her children, even if it means admitting that the system made a serious mistake? Each option carries enormous risks. Standing firm might satisfy those who value order and deference to institutions, but could cement his image as callous and out of touch with ordinary people's sense of fairness. A middle path might please no one, appearing weak and indecisive when the moment calls for moral clarity. Going all in on securing her release could revive his reputation as someone willing to fight for justice, but might open him up to accusations of political interference and set precedents he'll come to regret. There's no easy answer, no clean way out of this political quagmire. The mother herself sits in her cell, likely unaware of the political firestorm erupting outside the prison walls. Her days follow the grinding routine of incarceration, wake-up calls, mealtimes, limited recreation, the constant noise and lack of privacy that defines institutional life. She writes letters to her children that are read by prison officials before being sent, carefully choosing words that won't worry them too much while still expressing her love and longing to hold them again. She participates in whatever programs and activities are available, trying to use the time productively rather than descending into despair. Other inmates know her story now, and many have become fiercely protective of her, seeing her as someone who doesn't belong in this place, who got caught up in circumstances beyond her control and is paying a price far exceeding any reasonable punishment. Guards whisper about her case during shift changes, some sympathetic and others viewing her as just another convict who broke the law and deserves no special treatment. She exists in this strange limbo, trapped in a system that seems designed to break people rather than rehabilitate them, trying desperately to hold on to hope that somehow, some way, she'll get to go home to her babies. The coming hours and days will be crucial. Parliament is in an uproar, with MPs from all parties demanding statements and updates. The media that ignored this story for months is now scrambling to make up for lost time, dispatching reporters to interview the family, digging through court records, tracking down witnesses who were never called at trial. Public demonstrations are being organised with supporters planning to gather outside Downing Street demanding action. Legal teams are working frantically on new appeals and applications, hoping to capitalise on the momentum and attention to finally get a proper hearing. The jailed mother's children are being shielded from much of the chaos, but they sense that something big is happening. Something that might mean seeing their mummy again. And Starmer sits in strategy meetings surrounded by advisors, all shouting different advice, knowing that whatever he decides will be picked apart and criticised, but that he must decide something because doing nothing is no longer an option. The clock is ticking, the pressure is mounting, and the eyes of the nation are watching to see what happens next. This is the moment where political theory meets human reality, where the abstractions of policy and procedure collide with the concrete suffering of real people. What comes next will tell us not just about this case, but about who we are as a society and what we truly value when principles and compassion are put to the test. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double check responses.